You've probably heard it before. Gen Z is broke because they spend too much on coffee and avocado toast. But what if that story is completely wrong? What if an entire generation is struggling not because of bad habits, but because the system they were handed was already broken? Today, we're going to break down exactly why Gen Z is in a financial crisis, with real numbers, real causes, and no boomer blame. Let's get into it. Let's start with the raw data, because it's shocking. According to a 2026 Bank of America study, 42% of Gen Z are living paycheck to paycheck. Nearly half, 49%, say the high cost of living is the single biggest barrier to their financial success. A separate survey found that 41% run out of money almost every single month, and 25% have gone more than a week without being able to afford basic essentials, things like rent, food, and bills. Only 22% of Gen Z consider themselves financially stable. Let that sink in. Less than 1 in 4. And here's what makes this feel so unfair. Previous generations weren't dealing with this at the same age. So what changed? Problem number 1, education debt. Gen Z was told the same thing millennials were told. Go to college, get a degree, and you'll be fine. But the cost of that degree had exploded. Student loan balances are at record highs, and many entry-level jobs still don't pay enough to make a dent in them. Problem number 2, housing. Rent in most major cities has become nearly unaffordable for someone just starting their career. And buying. Almost out of the question. Mortgage rates, home prices, and down payment requirements have created a wall between Gen Z and home ownership that simply didn't exist for their parents at the same age. Problem number 3, wages haven't kept up. The average cost of living has increased by over 28% in the past decade, but wage growth has remained relatively flat. So even Gen Zers who are working full-time doing everything right are falling behind in real terms. As one finance professor put it, the burden of student loans combined with the rising cost of living leaves little room for financial flexibility. That's not a personal failure. That's a structural one. But the system didn't just make things harder, it also set traps. Enter buy now, pay later. 59% of Gen Zers use BNPL services. These apps sell themselves as smart, interest-free ways to buy things. But here's the catch. 57% of Gen Z users have already missed a payment in 2026. What looked like a lifeline is actually a debt spiral in disguise. Then there's crypto and high-risk investing. When you feel like traditional wealth building is out of reach, you start looking for shortcuts. 42% of Gen Z investors hold crypto. That's nearly 4 times the number who hold a retirement account. Because when home ownership feels impossible, why save conservatively? And social media makes everything worse. 72% of Gen Z say societal pressures contribute directly to their financial stress. When your feed is full of people flexing vacations, cars, and designer clothes, overspending to keep up feels almost inevitable. About 1 in 3 Gen Zers cope with financial anxiety by making a purchase. It's a cycle that feeds itself. This has created something economists are now calling financial nihilism. When an entire generation feels like the traditional path, work hard, save money, buy a house, retire, is simply not available to them, they stop trying to follow it. Over 70% of Gen Z and millennials say survival spending is their norm. Only 32% believe the American dream is still achievable. 30% of Gen Z say financial issues are their primary source of stress. And it's not just about money, it's about identity, hope, and the future. When you can't imagine owning a home or retiring comfortably, it changes how you see yourself. 1 in 3 Gen Zers admit they sometimes avoid thinking about money entirely when stressed. That avoidance makes things worse, but it's a completely human response to an overwhelming situation. Here's where the story gets more complicated and, honestly, more interesting. Despite everything, Gen Z is adapting. Nearly 70% have taken concrete steps in the past year to cut costs, skipping nights out, picking up side hustles, slashing subscriptions. 66% say they are actively saving, up from 60% in 2024. And here's the plot twist. Gen Z's home ownership rate is actually tracking ahead of millennials at the same age. They're buying differently. Smaller homes, cheaper cities, sometimes with family help. But they're buying. There's also the great wealth transfer on the horizon. Baby boomers hold over $78 trillion in wealth. An estimated $68 to $84 trillion is expected to pass to younger generations over the next 2 decades. For Gen Z who receive inheritances, the financial picture could shift dramatically. The point isn't that everything is fine. It's that this generation is scrappy, resourceful, and playing a rigged game better than they're given credit for. So, why is Gen Z broke? It's not the avocado toast. It's student debt that was normalized. It's housing costs that priced them out. It's wages that didn't keep up. It's financial products designed to exploit them. And it's a social media environment that made it all feel even worse. Gen Z didn't inherit a broken economy. They were handed one. If this video opened your eyes, share it with someone who still thinks it's a spending problem. And if you want more content breaking down how money and society actually work, subscribe. New video every week.